Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to learn something new. You see, my biggest task on YouTube is to show you something new every day. Be it gambits, traps, new tricks, or even new openings that are not so common on internet. That's my purpose, and that's why you have all the reasons to subscribe to this channel, because that encourages me a lot. And today you are going to witness something you've never seen before, I guess. So stay tuned and don't blink. So let's deal with the Sicilian defense once and for all. You will always start with the Vanguard opening, knight c3, and look at this. The second most played move in the Masters database is pawn to c5, which means most of your opponents are more likely to play this move in over-the-board games and other longer time control matches. Let's deal with this. What is common on YouTube after this position is the Grand Prix attack. That is all fine, but the move I want you guys to try out is this. Knight e4. If black continues with natural looking moves like pawn to d5, you can just take that pawn. Even if you're playing in a real tournament, here you're just up a pawn for nothing. If pawn to e5, the top played move in the Lichess database, you go knight b3. Knight c6, you go pawn to d4. Cause what you want to do at the end of the day, especially in the Sicilian defense or in the Vanguard opening, is to open the center. Learn to oversimplify your games. Pawn to e4 is the top played move here. Nobody wants to trade and allow the position to be opened. And now try to guess the best move, ladies and gentlemen. In this position, this is when you go the London way with bishop f4. And after pawn to f5, you go pawn to e3. Look at how safe this opening is, you guys. No risks at all. This will come as a shock to most of your opponents. I have never seen anything like this on the internet. By the way, if you're looking at pawn to g5 in this position, there's queen h5 check, and that pawn will die. So once again, whenever you see pawn to c5, just go knight e4, attacking that pawn, and if pawn to d5, you're just gonna take that for free. If e5, you go knight b3, knight c6, and pawn to d4. Any move is playable, by the way, but I don't see the reason why you shouldn't play pawn to d4 in this position. By the way, black should not even think of taking, cause I mean, at the end of the day, he is going to remain with an isolated pawn. You will develop your bishop anywhere you like and castle long and start advancing as fast as you can. So you won't see most advanced players taking on d4. They play e4, after which you go bishop f4 the London way, and after f5, you go pawn to e3. We saw what happens if black plays pawn to g5, you just go queen h5 check. If knight f6, the top played move, you want to develop your knight first before developing your last squad bishop. Why? Because it's easier to develop your bishop. So here you can go knight e2. By the way, knight h3 is also very much playable and interesting, but you want to put your knight on g3 to over control the h5 square. If bishop b4 check, you just play c3. If they play something like bishop d6, anything is playable. You can play bishop takes if you want, or bishop g3, but the move I like is pawn to h4. Why? Because I want black to take me so that I can put my knight on a better square. For example, bishop takes, knight takes, and because of this pawn to h4 move that I played previously, black can't play pawn to g5, and he will have to face the wrath of my knight on f4. If they don't take after pawn to h4 and say they just castle short, well, this is when I can take if I want. Yeah, because on the next move, I have a square for my king's knight. Again, black can't play pawn to g5 due to h takes g5. Let's say b6, stopping knight c5, something like that. Firstly, there are so many things that you can do in this position. If you think about it, bishop b5, queen c2, queen d2, knight h3 or knight h5, etc. But if you evaluate the position very well, you will see that the most powerful continuation here is pawn to c4. Why? Because you intend to play pawn to c5 next if black doesn't take your c pawn. So black is kind of forced to take so that you can develop your last squad bishop in the end. King h8 is forced, and then there are so many ways to kill a rat. Knight h5 is playable, a3, queen e2, queen c2, but out of everything, I love pawn to h5. I just want to go right to the head. And these are moments where black players tend to blunder with moves like bishop b7. Now it's your turn, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to find mate in 4. This is where you test your mind or let your head think. Because the purpose of your head is not just to carry your eyes. Think deep. Your head should not only be a container of eyes. Anyway, let's go. Let me know what you think about this position. Great. And that was an intro, believe it or not, because there's so much more to come. Let's look at something else before I end this video. Again, knight c3, pawn to c5. I should mention to say, at this stage of the game, this is not yet the Sicilian defense. It only becomes the Sicilian once you play pawn to e4 in this position. Now this is the closed Sicilian defense. It's like the game started with e4, pawn to c5, and then you play knight c3. So if you think about it, this is another way of dodging the Sicilian defense, avoiding to face the Sicilian defense, especially if you are an e4 player, because you just wait for black to play e5 so that you go pawn to e4 as well and continue with your 4 knights game. Anyway, knight c3, pawn to c5, and again you go knight e4. The top played move in both the Masters database and the Lichess database is pawn to e6. So what black wants to do is to play pawn to d5 now, knowing that you won't be able to take on c5 because their dark squared bishop is protecting that pawn. So now I want to give you the top secret and a simple repertoire that you will never see anywhere, probably. From here, your game plan is to play the Stonewall attack. So given a chance, you will play pawn to f4, e3, d4, pawn to c3, put your king's knight on f3, your queen's knight on f2, you develop your light squared bishop on d3 and castle shot. Sometimes you will even be playing pawn to b3 to develop your dark squared bishop. Done. For example, after pawn to e6, on move 2, you simply go pawn to f4, and the moment black plays d5, attacking your knight, you put your knight on f2. Your knight on f2 is guarding these important squares in case of anything. If black plays the top played move knight c6 or anything like that, you can go pawn to e3 if you want, or start with knight f3, because at the back of your mind, you know you want to play the Stonewall attack against the Sicilian defense. Wow. So you go knight f3, and after bishop d6, attacking your pawn, you protect it like this. And then white here should not even play pawn to e5, by the way. I know most of your opponents will try to do this in an effort to damage your Stonewall pawn structure, or maybe after noticing that you want to play the Stonewall structure. So if they play pawn to e5, you can just take back with anything you want, apart from your fingers, pawn takes or even knight takes. If they take back, you take back like this, let them take back with a bishop, and then, just like we saw before, once the dust settles, you always want to play pawn to d4 to open up the position. The bishop is under attack, so they will take most of the times, after which you take back, and after bishop c7, you can do all sorts of things. Bishop d3 is okay, bishop e3 is okay, but one secret of strong players, you guys, is they like developing moves with tempo. Every move must come with an attack. So bishop b5 check here is what most advanced players would play, because after bishop d7, they want to castle short after exchanging bishops like this. Pap, who's ahead in development? It's white. And even if black castles long, he doesn't have a c-pawn, so the king would still be exposed. So they play knight e7, and then you go queen f3, and then after they castle short, you go knight d3. Look at the squares you are controlling. You're about to develop your dark squared bishop, start pawn storming on the king side. Imagine you are having this position in the tournament, you guys, like in a serious classical tournament. Anyway, there are times when they are not going to take on d4 with their c-pawn. So if bishop d6 is played, you can take if you want, or just go bishop b5 check, and after bishop d7, you simplify the position again. But wait a second, this is another position you should keep in mind. First of all, you can take and castle short. There's nothing wrong with that, to be honest. But another interesting move is pawn to e4, kind of the Albin counter gambit, because if d takes, you don't take the pawn, you take the knight. This is more tactical, so if you don't like this, just take the pawn and castle short. But I prefer this line because if pawn takes, I oversimplify the game and castle short. Like this, after knight e7, I have queen f3, and I'm gonna get back my pawn. One thing I like about this, it's more like a system where you play the same things over and over. For example, after pawn to e6 and f4, d5 and knight f2, your plan will always be the same. You will always go e3, knight f3, pawn to d4, c3, etc. For example, we just finished looking at the knight c6 line. If black plays bishop d6 in this position, once again you can just go pawn to e3, defending that pawn, and sooner or later knight c6 is going to come. And you see, This is when you go knight to f3, and just like that, you are back to the position that we talked about, where black might push pawn to e5. But they don't have to, they just have to allow you create your stonewall pawn structure. By the way, after pawn to e3 and knight c6, you don't always have to go knight f3. If you just want to continue with the stonewall, just play pawn to d4. This is also playable, because if pawn takes, you're gonna take back, and boom, your f4 pawn is still protected. If queen c7, I see this a lot on leeches. You have a couple of defensive moves. You can play pawn to g3 or queen f3, even queen g4 by the way. But the move I like in this position is knight gh3, knowing there is no pawn to e5 by the way, because I'm just gonna take and threaten to take the bishop. There is no bishop takes, I'll just take with my other knight. So knight gh3 is very safe in this position. Then pawn to c3, bishop d3, and castle shot. Sometimes you can even start expanding on the king side right away. But anyways, just go knight f3. It's not much of a stretch. That's a standard move. Now another line to look out for after e6, f4, d5, knight f2, knight c6, and knight f3 is knight f6. Sometimes they might start with knight f6 before playing knight c6. We'll look at that, and it doesn't even matter because your first 10 opening moves will always be the same. So say knight f6, again you go pawn to e3 like the Stonewall Dutch. After bishop d6, if you want you can play b3 in this position, which Hikaru likes playing the most, or simply play in the style of the Stonewall Dutch. You can just go pawn to d4, again the Stonewall pawn setup. If cd, you can safely take, knowing your bishop is guarding the f4 pawn. If queen c7, again there's a lot of things you can do. Pawn to g3 is a move. Knight to h3 is also possible, but the move I like here is knight e5. Yeah, this is what we do in the Stonewall attack, just to shut all kinds of tactics. If castle shot, you just go pawn to c3, and then you continue developing as highlighted. For example, knight e4. If knight e4 comes, just take. Yeah, whenever you see knight e4, you know they want to play either pawn to f6 or f5. So just take, and after pawn takes, you still need to be tactically sharp. If you play queen c2, there's this simple tactic where black can take on d4, and you can't take back because you will lose your queen. So here you can play something like queen e2, attacking this pawn. If pawn to f5, well and good, you will remain with an active knight. You will develop your dark squared bishop here, play queen f2, bishop e2, castle shot, and then you're having a normal game. If pawn to f6, first you can take if you want, or retreat your knight wherever you want to. But this position is so good that Stockfish even encourages to sacrifice a piece in this position. So you take on e4, and after they take your knight, you take back on e5. If you want, put this on Stockfish, you will see that position is dead equal even after sacrificing a piece. That's just how powerful this opening can be. Bishop e7, you go bishop d3, wanting to take on h7. If pawn to g6, you have bishop h6. Look at this attack. If rook f5, you have queen e3. Now the rook is under attack. If rook h5, you can even castle short. If rook f7, now you have this other idea of, wanting to mess up black's pawn structure on the king side. If bishop d7, you have h5. If queen b6, for example, attacking the b2 pawn, because there's nothing else black had. h6, g6, pawn takes, queen g3. There's just massive attack that you're going to have. In fact, there's a mate in 2 here after bishop g5 check by the rook, and then pop. So this is another line that should give you confidence to play my elbow opening recommendation with knight e4. Now let's look at other possible sidelines before I end this video just now. Say after pawn to e6 and f4, then d5, knight f2, black doesn't play knight c6 or bishop d6, and instead they start with knight f6. Again, just go knight f3, because at the back of your mind, you want to play the Stonewall setup once again. And this is the line that we just finished looking at, where you can go pawn to b3, the move that Hikaru likes, or just pawn to d4. After e6, f4, d5, and knight f2, instead of knight f6, another move that a few of your opponents will try is pawn to d4, not allowing you to play your Stonewall attack setup. So what can you do here? Almost anything. That's just how safe this opening is, by the way. You can play pawn to e4 if you want. Yeah, like really, because if black takes with ampersand, you just take, and after queen takes, you don't have to take back with your king. You can take back with your knight if you don't want to lose the right to castle and continue playing normal chess. But anyways, this is not what I'm talking about or what I want to recommend. You don't have to exchange queens very early if you don't want. The other move you can play here is pawn to g3 actually, because you can't play e4 or pawn to e3 because of d takes e3. So g3 makes a lot of sense here. If queen d5, you just go knight f3 followed by bishop g2. In these kinds of setups, you will see most of your advanced players playing aggressive moves like pawn to h5, trying to mess up your king side as highlighted. So you just go knight f3 anyways, knowing if pawn to h4 comes, you will just take. You will just be up a pawn for nothing. So they'll play something like bishop e7, trying to renew the threat of h4. By the way, h4 is not even a threat in this position because after this, you always have pawn to g4. You don't even have to take. Anyway, so that's why in this position, I'll just play pawn to d3. Because if h4, I can just go g4 and pawn to h3 or even pawn to e4 right away. But anyways, let's just say g4, if knight c6, you have h3, and then g5 is coming, bishop g2 and castle shot, massive attack. I'm sure by now you have some ideas on how you can completely avoid the Sicilian defense if you are a king's pawn game lover. Don't forget to subscribe if you liked this video. Now, time for you to go and check out my new e5 defense course, which I have also linked in the comment section down below. And I'm glad to say, so far it has received a lot of attention and people are getting it like crazy. So it's an opening response that you try against white's e4 opening. You're going to learn how to play against the Scotch, the Royal Pace, the Bishop's opening, 3 Knights opening, the 4 Knights game, the Vienna game, even the Italian game. So it's the complete e5 defense course that I just launched with my team. You better go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching this video. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.